Well, for Isabel and myself, it was a wonderful experience. Generally speaking, it was great to work with such a professional team and Clint Eastwood, obviously. And it was also great to get back together with Spencer, Alec, and Anthony, as well as with Chris Norman, who is the French British guy who was on the train as well. Well, I knew that Spencer had told me that they wanted to see if they could get it turned into a movie. They had released the book 1 year after the attack, and Spencer and I had been in contact, and Isabel, myself, Isabel Spencer and myself had all gotten together in May of 2017 in Amsterdam just to hang out and have a good time. So I kind of knew things were in the works. And then I found out that, okay, the movie was on and that Spencer, Alec, and Anthony were going to play themselves. So when Tim Moore, one of the producers, called me one Saturday and told me that, in his words, he said, Clint wants you to be involved in the movie. And I said, okay, great, I'd love to. And then he asked me about Isabel, and I said, yeah, Isabel, she's into it too, even though I have to admit I had not asked her yet, but I just assumed she would. And then he asked me if our dog Benny would be available to play in the film too, because Benny had been on the train with us. And I informed him that, well, we had lost Benny on March 12th, 2016. And he said, oh, that's really too bad. But they ended up getting an actress dog to play Benny's role. Um, I think, well, for the way I looked at it was, I looked at this as a celebration of a victory, meaning that it was the first time in the history of France that there had been a terrorist attack on French soil, and yet there were no victims, no one had died. And a few years had gone by. You know, we were coming up on the second anniversary, so physically, I'm about as good as I'm going to get, and mentally, that had given both Isabel and myself some time to try to move past the whole thing as much as possible. So I felt we were about as ready as we were ever going to be. And we're both big, cinema fans. So this was going to be our one chance to be in a movie. And if it's going to be directed by Clint Eastwood and it's going to be a story based on what really happened to us, uh, we were ready to go. That's right. It was uh, it was Friday, August 21st, and we were coming back on the train called the Thalys, Thalys. That's a train that runs from Amsterdam to Paris. And it's a train we had taken many times and we have taken several times since. Um, and we had just passed the Brussels station about 10 minutes earlier. And I had noticed someone walking into the bathroom, um, and they were rolling a piece of luggage in behind them, which was very odd because the bathrooms on those trains are very, very small. And in all the trips I've taken on that train, I'd never seen anyone go into the bathroom with a suitcase. So I thought right then and there, okay, this is a little strange. But I didn't know what to make of it. And so we were both on our cell phones at that point, and I let 10 minutes go by. And to the best of my knowledge, no one had come out of the bathroom. So I decided just to get up and check it out. I guess my curious nature. And I opened the little glass sliding door that lets you into the little hallway section where the bathroom is. And to my left, I saw a young man leaning up against the wall. And I figured that maybe the other person had already left the bathroom. And I was just kind of standing there with the other guy. A second or two goes by. I turned my head to see the gunman standing at the threshold of the doorway to the bathroom. His eyes were really big, he looked really surprised. And then he, myself, and Damien, which is the name of the Frenchman who wishes to remain anonymous, we all just kind of looked at each other for a few moments, and I didn't understand what was going on. And then another second goes by, and Damien grabs him by the throat. And then I realized, okay, this is for real. And the first thing that went through my mind was the fact that I was concerned that if there were a struggle or during the struggle, that maybe a stray bullet might hit Isabel, who was sitting right on the other side of the like glass wall or plexiglass wall. So my first thought was to get her out of the way. And I went and told her, get out of here, it's serious. She got up and left. I didn't see how far she went because I had assumed she would be going to the next car. But in fact, she just went 2 rows down, 2 or 3 rows down, and ducked behind a couple of seats. And then I went back in to help the guy who was, kind of wrestling with the gunman. And it's kind of confusing at that point because everything was in slow motion, um, kind of blurry. Um, and the next thing I know, there's more wrestling and kind of standing up wrestling. And the next thing I know, I've got the AK-47 in my hands. I decided I would run with the gun and find someone to give it to or find somewhere to put it, and then go back and give the other guy a hand. I took about 3 steps, and the gunman had a pistol, like a 9mm pistol, and he shot me in the back with that. I floated in the air for just a few seconds, realized what had just happened, and I said to myself, I'm going to die on this train. And when I fell, I dropped the AK-47, and I was at that point I couldn't do anything else, so I just crawled over to my left, between 2 rows of seats, thinking basically that everything was over, that I had failed, and that all the gunman had to do was come back and retrieve the AK or keep firing his pistol, and we were all goners. Um, a few moments passed, and then I started to hear some footsteps and some voices, and I turned my head to my right, and I saw Spencer Stone flying through the air like Superman, and he was tackling the gunman. And at that point, I felt relieved because I still assumed that I was going to die because I was bleeding a lot. The bullet entered my back, cracked a rib, pierced the left lung, and then severed an artery on the way out. And it was the artery that was really pulsating and pumping a lot of blood out of my system. And then, right thereafter, once I realized that the cavalry had arrived, um, I kind of lifted my head and turned a little bit to look straight ahead of me. And through a little hole between the 2 seats, I could see further down several rows. And 2 rows down, at the same time as my head was lifting up to kind of look in that direction, my wife's Isabel's head popped up two rows further down, and our eyes locked. And I told her in English, I said, I'm hit. And then in French, I said, c'est fini, it's over, because I wanted her to know that I knew that I was going to die. Right after that, I lost consciousness at some point. They say that I did manage to stand back up, but then fell back down, but I don't remember that. But that could be quite possible since I did black out. But as soon as I said that to my wife, Isabel, she came around from where she was to help me. And she initially saw the entry wound in my back. But she didn't realize at that point that there was an exit wound in my neck. So she was, obviously very concerned, but she kept her cool enough to go and look for a doctor in the first car, which was car 11, at the front of the train. Um, she couldn't find anyone, but she came back with a scarf to make a tourniquet to try to stop the bleeding from the wound in my back. Then she noticed at that point the wound in the front, and she saw that, okay, that's a lot more serious. And she stayed by my side and gave me lots of support, let me know she was there. And when Spencer and Alec had subdued the gunman to the point where they were holding him on the floor, and Chris Norman, the French British guy, had come and was also helping them to hold him down. Isabel then went to find some neckties to help tie that guy up, and she came back with the neckties, and she had also brought a towel to use kind of as like a compress to put, on either the back wound or the wound in my neck. Spencer came over, and was a paramedic in the Air Force, and he just immediately stuck his index finger and middle finger into the exit wound in my neck, really literally inside, and he said he could feel the artery pulsating, and he just kept them in there the whole time until we got to the train station. And that was kind of a slow, ride, because they had to redirect the train. Yeah. Well, I'm only in a few scenes, so maybe three, for example. Um, if you mean mentally, um, obviously this was going to be a challenge to try to recreate um, the feelings I had on that day. One thing that ended up, um, well, what happened was my father died on the first day of the shooting of the film. He had been ill, but the doctors thought he had another 3 months, but then his health started to decline rapidly. He knew I was going to be in the film, and he was happy about that. So when I found out that he had died when Isa and I were on our way uh, to the hotel for makeup and everything at 4:30 in the morning over here, um, I got the text message, and I kind of decided that the best thing I could do was to try to channel those emotions in some way, and that would perhaps be better for everything. And I guess what that did, Laura, was it kind of put things into perspective for me. As bad as recreating, certain scenes was, it couldn't compare to what had just happened, to the fact that I just lost my father. So that kind of helped keep things in perspective. I think a- absolutely that's what he wanted. He wanted me to do the film, and so I did it, knowing that. Um, for Isabel, I think it was difficult to see me on the floor again in a pool of blood. I think that that brought back a lot of bad memories and pain and stress. Um, but she did a wonderful job in the film and was able uh, to keep going on, to keep going. And in a certain way, the emotion that she was feeling was the emotion that was needed for the film. That's a good question. Um, I would have to say the whole process, just being able to go and hang out with Spencer, Alec, and Anthony, um, uh, to meet Clint Eastwood, and I think I spent maybe 2 hours just in face-to-face discussions with him over the 4-day period we were shooting the film. And he's really an amazing guy, and just to have the opportunity to be sitting casually chatting with Clint Eastwood about uh, childhood, about music, about the film. Uh, that was pretty exciting. Um, well, the way I look at this is I just see how lucky we were. There were so many things that had to be the way they were in order for this to work out the way it did. Um, Isa and myself, we never go to Amsterdam in the summer. That was exceptional. And it was because I'd lost my mother 2 months earlier to cancer, and we just wanted to do something different. Um, Spencer, Alec, and Anthony were considering not coming to Paris and just staying in Amsterdam because they were having such a good time. But in the end, they boarded the train. Damien, the Frenchman, who's remaining anonymous, but who was the first person to physically attack the gunman, um, he had gone to the restroom at the other end of car 13 and was told that it was out of order. And that's why he found himself standing right in front of the door where I ended up seeing him for the first time. Um, so there are all of these things that had to come together in order for this to work out the way it did. And that's what that's what I keep thinking about when I think about what happened. And as far as what the viewers are going to take home or what they're going to get out of it, um, maybe they'll be looking at how ordinary people did something special, were able to rise to the challenge. Uh, Maybe they'll find something else. I'm not sure. Well, well, they say that there were over 500 passengers on board the train, so I guess that could have been the number of victims, and it would have been pretty much like shooting fish in a barrel. Unfortunately, that's what the situation was. I It's just part of my nature. I'm curious, and I just wanted to go have a look see and see what was going on. Being that way in my life has had its ups and downs. I mean, there's times when you do something like that and you realize you're just putting your nose into somebody else's business and it wasn't the right thing to do. But in this particular case, it really was. Ray is a really nice guy, and he's the first actor I met on my way to a training session for stunts. And he's the nicest guy, but man, can he look mean when he wants to. So when he is when he's given that mean look and lifting up that pistol, I mean, it's pretty darn scary. Well, I didn't see um, the gunman's eyes except for at the very beginning when he had that look of total surprise on his face, just like Damien and I did. He shot me as I was moving away from him. So I never, really got to see him making an angry or mean expression. Well, Spencer got hurt. The gunman ended up not only having an AK and 9 millimeter pistol, but he also had a box cutter, and he cut Spencer pretty badly in the back of the neck and his thumb. Really, really cut the thumb. I mean, practically severed it off. And I guess we were the two who got hurt, physically. Like I said, we got so lucky, and there was some heart involved too. And we're just also happy to have this opportunity to have made this film with Clint Eastwood, and it gives me and Isabel, and I guess everybody, uh, a better look at the lives of Spencer, Alec, and Anthony from their childhood years until present day. I think what the way he explained it, he had been working with them, going over the story, and they had been kind of hanging out together just to get to know each other more. And apparently, the more time he spent with them, the more he started to think to himself, I think these guys have what it takes to play themselves. And then it just kind of ended up getting, he started including more and more people. And I don't know uh, exactly, aside from that, I don't know what made him come to that decision, but we were all happy that he did. I think that when you go through something like this with people, especially people like Spencer, Alec, and Anthony, whom we just happen to get along with them really well. It's just really natural. I mean, they're a lot younger than us. They're only 25 today. Um, uh, it's and we've hung out together since. We've had a few drinks together, and the conversation is never lacking. So we feel really fortunate to have made some valuable friends. And at the same time, when something like this happens, uh, you see a lot of people, many whom you've never met, who will maybe send you an email or something like that to give you their support. And that was one of the most amazing things that I recall seeing when I got my phone back after 10 days because the police had kept it as part of the crime scene. And when I turned it on and opened up the email application, there were literally hundreds in there, and many of them from people I had never met. I can play, although it's not quite the same way as I used to. I will always have some little problems with my left index and left thumb. My left arm always kind of feels like it's asleep, and there's kind of an overall numbness to the left arm and parts of the left hand. But I'm going to find a way to play no matter what. So uh, I've been playing. Isa and I have been recording. We've put down some new tracks for an eventual fifth CD from Secret Season, and we just look forward to finishing it. Could have. I'm not sure. Over here, it opens on February 7th. Um, right. And we have, well, that's in France. It opens the 7th. The US is on the 9th. We did go to a press screening this past Monday. So we did get to see the entire film, and we like. Yes, we're happy with it. At the same time, being that we're in it and we know everybody else who's in it, at least the people who were filmed in France, um, I think you get a little distracted just wondering how it's all going to turn out. And when I spoke to Alec and Anthony and Spencer about that, they said it was the same for them, that they had to watch it a second time to just be able to sit back and enjoy the show. Definitely. Thank you. I'll see what I can dig up. I'll see what I can dig up. By the way, Laura, there's one thing I wanted to say. It's really important to me that Isa be recognized for some of the things that she did on the train because Given that that particular scene is kind of a loaded scene, there's a lot of things going on. They weren't able to really put in the things that I mentioned that she had done. Um, and I would really appreciate it if you could manage to mention some of those things. Right. Yeah. Well, every once in a right. Okay. Great. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Wonderful.